There is a place inside you that has been waiting for you to stop running, not because you have failed, not because you are broken, but because you have spent so much of your life believing that that peace will come only when everything outside of you finally becomes peaceful, when people understand you, when the past stops hurting, when the future becomes certain, when your mind finally stops producing thoughts you do not want. But what if peace does not begin when the mind becomes silent? What if peace begins the moment you stop fighting the noise? Take a slow, gentle breath in, and as you breathe out, allow yourself to arrive here. You do not need to solve your entire life right now. You do not need to become a completely different person tonight. You do not need to force yourself to be positive. You do not need to pretend that fear is not present. You do not need to push sadness away. For these next moments, you can simply be here with whatever is here. Perhaps your mind is tired. Perhaps you have been carrying thoughts that repeat themselves again and again. Maybe you have been telling yourself that you are not good enough. Maybe you have been expecting something terrible to happen. Maybe you have spent years returning to the same memories, the same fears, the same doubts, believing that because a thought has appeared in your mind so many times, it must be true. But a thought is not a command. A thought is not a prophecy. A thought is not your identity. A thought is simply something passing through the vast space of awareness, and you are not required to follow every thought that appears. For a moment, notice what happens when a thought arrives. Perhaps the mind says, I need to fix this. Perhaps it says, I should be somewhere else. Perhaps it reminds you of something that happened years ago. And instead of arguing with the thought, instead of trying to destroy it, simply notice. There is a thought. That is all. You do not have to become the thought. You do not have to fight the thought. You can allow it to be there just as you might allow a cloud to pass through the sky. The sky does not chase the cloud away. The sky does not become angry because the cloud has appeared. The sky remains open. And within you, there is also a space that is larger than everything you are thinking and feeling. You may have forgotten this space. Perhaps you have been so identified with your thoughts that you believe every fear belongs to you. Perhaps you have been so identified with your pain that you believe you are the pain. But you can experience fear without becoming fear. You can experience sadness without becoming sadness. You can experience uncertainty without losing yourself inside uncertainty. This is where the reprogramming begins, not by forcing the mind to think perfect thoughts, not by repeating words while secretly fighting everything you feel. The mind begins to change when you meet your experience with a different kind of awareness. Instead of saying, I must get rid of this feeling, you begin to say, I can be here with this feeling. Instead of saying, why am I still like this? You begin to ask, what is happening right now? Instead of running from discomfort, you begin to gently turn toward it, not to punish yourself, not to remain trapped in pain, but to discover that the feeling you feared may be asking only to be felt. Take another slow breath and notice that in this moment you are already here. The past is not happening right now. The future is not happening right now. There is only this breath, this body, this moment. And perhaps for just a few seconds, you do not have to carry the entire weight of your life. You can put it down, not forever, just for now. You can release the need to know exactly what will happen. You can release the need to control how everyone feels about you. You can release the demand that life must unfold according to your expectations before you allow yourself to be at peace. Because sometimes the deepest suffering does not come only from what is happening. It comes from the mind saying, this should not be happening. I should not feel this way. My life should already be different. And perhaps there is another possibility. Perhaps you can begin exactly where you are, not where you wish you were, not where you think you should be, here with this breath, with this mind. With this life, you do not have to wait until you become fearless to begin living. You do not have to wait until your mind is completely healed to experience a moment of peace. You do not have to wait until every wound has disappeared before you can be gentle with yourself. Healing is often not the moment when pain vanishes. Sometimes healing is the moment you stop abandoning yourself whenever pain appears. So if anxiety appears, stay. If sadness appears, breathe. If uncertainty appears, soften. If the mind becomes restless, notice you are learning something new. You are teaching your mind that every uncomfortable feeling does not require an emergency. You are teaching your body that it is allowed to pause. You are teaching your heart that it does not have to close every time life becomes painful. And slowly, gently, with patience, a new relationship with your inner world begins. You no longer need to believe every story your mind tells you. You can listen without obeying. You can feel without drowning. You can remember without returning to the past. You can imagine the future without living inside fear. You can remain open even when you do not have all the answers. Now, silently repeat within yourself, I do not have to believe every thought. I can notice my thoughts and let them pass. I am allowed to feel what I feel. I do not need to fight this moment. I can meet myself with patience. I can begin again. And if your mind wanders, that is not a failure. The moment you notice that you have wandered is already a moment of awareness. You have already returned. There is no need to criticize yourself for leaving the present. Simply come back. And again, and again. This is how the mind begins to change, not through violence, but through returning. Every time you return to your breath, you strengthen presence. Every time you notice a thought without becoming lost in it, you create space. Every time you choose compassion instead of self-judgment, you create a new possibility. And perhaps you have spent years believing that you must become someone else in order to be worthy of peace. But maybe the journey is not about becoming someone else. Maybe it is about slowly releasing everything that keeps you from seeing what has always been here. The awareness beneath the fear, the stillness beneath the noise, the openness beneath the defenses, the quiet strength that remains even after everything you thought you could depend on has changed. So for now, do not force anything. Do not try to manufacture a special experience. Simply breathe. Allow this moment to be ordinary. Allow yourself to be human. And remember, you are not required to win a battle against your own mind. You can learn to stop fighting. You can learn to listen. You can learn to let thoughts come and go. You can learn to remain present with your life, one breath at a time. And perhaps as you continue through this meditation, something inside you will begin to understand. You do not need to control every thought in order to be free. You do not need to eliminate every fear in order to be peaceful. You do not need to change everything around you in order to begin changing the way you meet your life. Right now, in this moment, you can begin, not tomorrow, not when everything is perfect. Now, with one breath, with one moment of awareness, with one gentle decision not to abandon yourself, take a slow breath in and slowly breathe out. Let the mind be as it is. Let the body be as it is. Let this moment be as it is. And from this place of allowing, something new can begin. One of the deepest changes you can make in your life begins with something very simple. You begin to notice your thoughts, not to control them, not to fight them, not to force them to become positive, simply to notice. Because most of us have spent years believing that every thought appearing in the mind is telling us the truth. A thought appears and immediately we follow it. The mind says something is wrong, and we begin searching for what is wrong. The mind says, they do not like me, and we begin collecting evidence. The mind says, I am going to fail, and suddenly the future feels like a place where failure has already happened. The mind says, I cannot handle this, and the body begins to react as though danger is already here. But what if the appearance of a thought does not mean you have to follow it? What if a thought can simply be seen? What if instead of saying, I am anxious, you begin to notice anxiety is present? Instead of saying, I am afraid, you notice fear is here. Instead of saying, I am a failure, you recognize the mind is producing a painful story about failure. There is a small but powerful difference between these two ways of experiencing life. When you say, I am anxious, it can feel as though anxiety has become your identity. When you say, anxiety is here, there is already a little space. You are still aware of the feeling. You are not denying it, but you are no longer completely trapped inside it. This space is where freedom begins. You may have been taught directly or indirectly that you must control your mind. You may believe that a peaceful mind is a mind that never produces fear, anger, doubt, sadness, or disturbing thoughts. But the mind is not a machine that can be forced into silence. Thoughts arise, feelings arise, memories arise, worries arise. Sometimes they come without permission, and the more desperately you try to push them away, the more important they may begin to seem. Try for a moment not to think about a particular thought. The moment you try to push it away, you must first remember what it is. You must keep checking whether it has returned. And in this way, the struggle keeps it alive. This is why inner freedom does not always begin by making the mind quiet. Sometimes it begins by ending the war with the mind. You do not have to win against every thought. You do not have to defeat every fear. You do not have to become the perfect version of yourself before you are allowed to rest. You can simply observe. A thought comes. You notice it. A feeling comes. You notice it. A memory comes. You notice it. And then, without needing to push anything away, you allow the experience to move through, like a bird crossing the open sky. The sky does not chase the bird. The sky does not hold on to the bird. The bird appears, moves, and disappears, and the sky remains. There is something within you that is capable of observing the movement of your mind. Think about that for a moment. If you can notice a thought, then you are not only the thought. If you can observe fear, then there is an awareness that is larger than fear. If you can notice sadness, then there is something within you that can be present with sadness. The thought is an experience. The emotion is an experience, but awareness is the space in which the experience is known. And perhaps you have spent so much time looking at what is happening inside your mind that you have forgotten to notice the one who is watching. So, right now, take a slow breath and notice the next thought that appears. Do not choose the thought. Do not try to create one. Just wait. Perhaps a thought about this meditation appears. Perhaps a memory. Perhaps a concern about tomorrow. Perhaps the mind says, this is not working. Whatever appears, let it appear. And when you notice it, simply say inwardly, thinking. Not good thinking. Not bad thinking. Just thinking. Then allow it to be. You do not need to complete the thought. You do not need to argue with it. You do not need to follow it to its conclusion. A thought can remain unfinished This is something the mind does not always understand. The mind wants answers, it wants conclusions, it wants to know what everything means. But not every thought requires an answer. Not every feeling requires a solution. Not every question must be resolved today. Sometimes the mind is simply moving, and you can allow it to move. This is where you begin to reprogram the relationship you have with your own mind. You are not trying to create a mind that never produces difficult thoughts. You are creating a mind that no longer automatically believes every difficult thought. This is a completely different kind of freedom. A fearful thought may still appear, but you do not have to build a life around it. A painful memory may still arise, but you do not have to return to the past and live there for the entire day. A worry about the future may appear, but you can notice that worry is happening in the present moment. The future has not arrived. The imagined event is not happening right now. There is only the thought of it. And a thought, no matter how powerful it feels, is still a thought. This does not mean that your thoughts are meaningless. It means they do not have to be your master. You can listen to the mind without obeying everything it says. You can hear fear without allowing fear to make every decision. You can feel anger without becoming cruel. You can experience sadness without believing that sadness will last forever. You can feel uncertainty without demanding immediate certainty. This is the practice of becoming the observer, not a cold observer, not someone who disconnects from life, but someone who learns to remain present with life without being pulled away by every wave. Imagine standing beside a river. The water is moving. Leaves float past. Branches float past. Perhaps even things you would rather not see pass through the water. You do not need to jump into the river to prove that you have seen them. You can remain on the bank. You can observe. The mind is similar. Thoughts move through. Some are beautiful. Some are painful. Some are repetitive. Some are strange. Some are old. Some are new. But you do not have to jump into every thought. You do not have to follow every current. You can notice the river and remain where you are. And perhaps at first you will forget. You will become lost in a thought. You will suddenly realize that you have spent 10 minutes worrying about something that is not happening. Do not punish yourself for this. The moment you notice that you have become lost is not a failure. That moment is awareness. You have returned. This is important. Many people believe meditation means never becoming distracted, but perhaps meditation is learning to return again and again and again. You notice that the mind has wandered, and instead of saying, I am terrible at this, you simply return to the breath. You notice that you have become lost in a memory, and instead of criticizing yourself, you gently return. You notice that fear has taken over your attention, and you say, fear is here. Then you breathe. The return is the practice. The return is the strengthening. Every time you return, you are teaching your mind something new. You are teaching it, I can notice what is happening. I do not have to react immediately. I can experience a thought without becoming it. I can feel an emotion without being destroyed by it. I can return. This is how change often happens, not in one dramatic moment, not by forcing yourself to become completely different overnight, but through small moments of awareness repeated again and again. A thought appears, you notice, you return. A feeling appears, you notice, you remain. A fear appears, you notice. You breathe, and slowly something changes. The mind begins to discover that it does not have to control everything. The body begins to discover that every uncomfortable sensation is not an emergency. The heart begins to discover that it can remain open without having all the answers, And you begin to discover that peace is not always the absence of difficulty. Sometimes peace is the ability to remain present while difficulty is moving through you. So now allow yourself to sit with whatever is present. If the mind is calm, notice calmness. If the mind is restless, notice restlessness. If there is sadness, notice sadness. If there is resistance, notice resistance. You do not have to improve this moment. You do not have to make it special. You do not have to become peaceful before you can be present. You can begin with exactly what is here. And perhaps this is one of the kindest things you can offer yourself. Not the demand to be different, but the willingness to meet yourself as you are. The mind may still think, let it think. The heart may still feel, let it feel. The body may still carry tension. Let yourself notice. You are not required to become empty of experience. You are learning to become spacious enough to hold experience. And there is a difference. A small room feels overwhelmed when too many things are placed inside it, but the sky is not overwhelmed by clouds. The ocean is not destroyed by a wave, and the awareness within you may be larger than the thought that is currently demanding all of your attention. So when the mind says, this feeling will last forever, notice. When it says, I cannot handle this, notice. When it says, something terrible is going to happen, notice. You do not have to argue. You do not have to prove the thought wrong. You can simply say, this is a thought, and then return to what is actually happening now, the breath, the body, the ground beneath you, the sounds around you, this moment. The mind may take you into yesterday. The mind may take you into tomorrow. But you can return. You can return without anger. You can return without shame. You can return with patience. And each return is a quiet act of freedom because you are no longer allowing the mind to take you everywhere it wants to go. You are learning to choose where you place your attention. And eventually you may begin to understand something profound. You do not need to destroy the mind in order to find peace. You do not need to silence every thought. You do not need to become fearless. You do not need to eliminate every uncomfortable feeling. You can live with an open heart while uncertainty is present. You can breathe while fear is present. You can continue while doubt is present. You can rest while the mind is imperfect. The goal is not to become someone who never struggles. The goal is to stop believing that struggle means you have lost yourself. You are still here. Even when the mind is noisy, you are still here. Even when the heart is hurting, you are still here. Even when you do not know what comes next. And perhaps this awareness has been quietly present through every experience you have ever had, through joy, through grief, through fear, through change, through the moments you thought you could not continue. Thoughts changed, feelings changed, circumstances changed, but something in you remained capable of noticing. That is where you can rest, not in the promise that nothing difficult will ever happen, but in the understanding that you can meet what happens one moment at a time. So take one more slow breath, and as you breathe out, release the need to fight the mind. Let thoughts come. Let thoughts go. You do not have to chase them. You do not have to push them away. You can watch. You can breathe. You can return. And from this moment forward, whenever an old thought appears, you have a choice. You can immediately believe it, or you can pause. You can notice. You can ask, is this something I know, or is this simply something the mind is saying? You do not need to answer quickly. You can remain present. You can allow uncertainty. You can let the thought be there without allowing it to control your entire life. And slowly, the mind begins to learn a new way, not through force, not through hatred, not through constant correction, but through awareness, through patience, through returning again and again. And perhaps one day a thought that once controlled you will appear and you will notice it. You will feel the familiar pull. But this time you will not immediately follow. You will breathe, you will watch, and you will realize, I am aware of this thought. And in that realization, there is space. In that space, there is choice. And in that choice, there is freedom. So allow yourself to rest here for a moment. You are not your thoughts. You are not every fear that visits you. You are not every painful memory. You are not every story your mind has repeated. You are the awareness that can notice. You are the presence that can return. You are the space in which experience comes and goes, and you do not have to become perfect to begin. You only have to notice the next thought, the next breath, the next moment, and then gently return. This is how you begin to change your mind. This is how you begin to change your relationship with fear. This is how you begin to discover that freedom was never dependent on controlling every thought. The mind may continue to move. Let it move. Life may continue to change. Let it change. You may not know what comes next. And for this moment, you do not have to know. You can breathe, you can remain, you can meet this moment as it is, and perhaps that is enough. Perhaps right now, nothing needs to be fixed. Perhaps you can simply be here, and perhaps for the first time in a long time, you can allow yourself to understand a thought can arise without becoming your reality. A feeling can arise without becoming your identity. A difficult moment can arise without becoming your entire life. You can notice, you can breathe, you can remain, and you can return to yourself again and again and again. There is a kind of exhaustion that comes from trying to control everything. You may not even realize how much energy you spend trying to make life behave in a way that feels safe to you. You try to control what people think of you. You try to control what happens tomorrow. You try to control whether someone stays or leaves, whether a plan succeeds or fails, whether your body feels comfortable, whether your mind produces peaceful thoughts. And underneath all of this effort, there may be a quiet belief that says, if I can just control enough, I will finally be safe. But life does not make such a promise. You can plan carefully and still encounter the unexpected. You can love someone deeply and still not control their choices. You can do everything you believe is right and still experience disappointment. You can take every precaution and still discover that uncertainty has entered your life. This is not a punishment. It is simply part of being alive. And perhaps the suffering does not come only from uncertainty itself. Perhaps it comes from the mind insisting that uncertainty should not exist. You may notice this in small ways. You make a plan and something changes. Immediately, the mind says, this should not be happening. Someone behaves differently than you expected. And the mind says, they must change. You feel an emotion you do not like, and the mind says, I must get rid of this. The future is unclear, and the mind says, I need to know exactly what will happen. There is nothing wrong with wanting things to go well. There is nothing wrong with making plans, protecting yourself, or taking wise action. The difficulty begins when you believe that your peace depends on controlling everything, because then life becomes a constant struggle against reality. You are no longer simply living the moment. You are trying to manage the moment. You are no longer simply meeting people. You are trying to control how they see you. You are no longer simply experiencing an emotion. You are trying to make sure you never feel it again, and this can become a very lonely way to live. So, for a moment, take a slow breath and notice where control is present in your own life. Perhaps you are trying to control an outcome. Perhaps you are trying to control another person's opinion. Perhaps you are trying to control the future. Perhaps you are trying to control your own thoughts. You do not need to judge yourself for this. The desire to control usually comes from fear. Some part of you may be saying, if I do not control this, something terrible might happen. And perhaps you can meet that fear with kindness. You can say, I understand why you are afraid. You do not have to fight the part of you that wants certainty. You do not have to force yourself to suddenly become completely relaxed about the unknown. You can simply begin to notice the effort. Notice how the body feels when you are trying to control something that cannot be controlled. Perhaps the shoulders become tense. Perhaps the jaw tightens. Perhaps the mind begins to repeat the same questions. What if this happens? What if that happens? What should I do? What should they do? How can I prevent this? And perhaps you begin to see that the mind is trying to create safety by thinking more. But thinking more does not always create more safety. Sometimes it only creates more thoughts. You can think about tomorrow for hours, and tomorrow will still arrive as tomorrow. You can rehearse every possible conversation, and life may still surprise you. You can imagine every possible problem, and there will still be things you could not have imagined. This does not mean you should stop caring. It means you can begin to distinguish between wise action and endless mental struggle. Wise action asks, what can I do now? Fear asks, how can I guarantee that nothing will ever go wrong? And perhaps there is no answer to the second question, not because you are powerless, but because life has never been completely controllable. You can control some actions. You can choose your words. You can choose where you place your attention. You can decide whether to take the next step, but you cannot control every result. You cannot control every person. You cannot control every event. You cannot control every feeling. And perhaps peace begins when you stop demanding that you should be able to. Take a breath. Feel the body sitting here. Notice that in this moment, you do not need to solve the entire future. The future is not asking you to live it right now. Right now, you are only being asked to be here. The mind may say, but what about later? Later is not here. The mind may say, what if something goes wrong? Perhaps something will go wrong. Perhaps something will go beautifully. Perhaps both will happen. Life has always contained both. You do not need to know which one is coming in order to breathe this breath. This is a very different way of meeting life. Instead of asking, how can I make sure nothing changes? You begin asking, can I remain present while things change? Instead of asking, how can I guarantee that I will never be hurt? You begin asking, can I learn to meet pain when it comes without abandoning myself? Instead of asking, how can I make everyone understand me? You begin asking, can I remain true to what I know without requiring everyone to agree? These questions do not make life easy, but they may make life more honest because life is changing all the time. The body changes, relationships change, the mind changes, circumstances change. Even the things you once believed would remain forever may eventually change. And when you demand that changing things remain unchanged, suffering appears, not because change is wrong, but because the mind is fighting what is already happening. So perhaps for this moment, you can practice allowing something to be as it is. It may be a small thing. Perhaps you allow a sound to exist without wishing it were gone. Perhaps you allow a thought to be present without trying to solve it. Perhaps you allow a feeling to move through the body without immediately labeling it as a problem. Perhaps you allow yourself not to know. just for a few moments. Not knowing does not mean that something is wrong. You do not need to have every answer before you can continue. A seed does not know the entire shape of the tree it will become. A child does not know the whole path of a lifetime, and yet life continues to unfold. You may also continue to unfold without having complete certainty. There may be a part of you that wants a guarantee before taking the next step. But perhaps life rarely gives guarantees. Perhaps it gives only the next step and then another, and then another. You do not have to see the entire road to walk the part of it that is visible. This does not mean walking blindly. It means allowing the present moment to be enough for the next decision. You can make the best choice you know how to make. And then when new information appears, you can respond again. This is what it means to live with openness, not passivity, not carelessness, openness. You remain awake, you remain attentive, you act when action is needed. But you do not spend every moment trying to force life into a shape it has not chosen. And perhaps you can notice how much freedom becomes available when you stop trying to control another person's mind. Someone may misunderstand you. You can clarify. Someone may criticize you. You can listen or choose not to. Someone may leave. You can grieve. Someone may stay. You can appreciate them. But their choices are not entirely yours to control, and this can be painful to accept because love often makes us want to hold on tightly. Fear often makes us want to hold on tightly, but holding tightly does not always create closeness. Sometimes the hand that refuses to open becomes exhausted from holding what it fears losing. So perhaps you can ask yourself gently, what am I holding too tightly? Not to force yourself to let go immediately, just to notice. What are you trying to make happen? What are you trying to prevent? What outcome have you decided must occur before you allow yourself to relax? And perhaps underneath the demand, there is fear. Meet the fear. Do not punish it. Do not shame it. You can say, I see that I want certainty. I see that I want to control this. I see that I am afraid of what might happen. And then breathe. You do not have to make the fear disappear. You are simply no longer pretending that control will solve everything. Sometimes the most courageous thing you can do is to admit, I do not know. I do not know what tomorrow will bring. I do not know exactly how another person will respond. I do not know how every situation will unfold. And still, I can be here. Still, I can breathe. Still, I can take the next honest step. This is not weakness. There is strength in being willing to remain present without a guarantee. The mind may believe that uncertainty is a door leading only to danger. But uncertainty is also the place where possibility exists. If you knew every detail of the future, there would be no surprise, no discovery, no unexpected kindness, no new beginning. The unknown can contain pain, but it can also contain life you have not yet imagined. So perhaps you do not have to love uncertainty. You do not have to become excited about not knowing. You can simply stop demanding that uncertainty disappear before you allow yourself to live. Let the unknown be unknown. Let tomorrow remain tomorrow. Let other people be other people. Let your feelings move as feelings move, and return to what is yours to do now. This breath, this moment, this choice, this step. There is something deeply peaceful about discovering that you do not have to manage the entire universe. You do not have to carry the responsibility for every outcome. You do not have to make everything work. You do not have to prevent every loss. You do not have to guarantee that you will never experience pain. You can care deeply without controlling everything. You can prepare without obsessing. You can love without possessing. You can act without demanding a guaranteed result. You can move forward without knowing exactly where the road will lead. And when life changes, you can meet the change, not perfectly, not without fear, but honestly, you can say, this is what is happening now. And then ask, what is the next thing this moment is asking of me? Perhaps the answer is to rest. Perhaps it is to speak. Perhaps it is to wait. Perhaps it is to release. Perhaps it is simply to breathe. You do not have to solve everything at once. You are not required to control the entire story. You only have to meet the page you are currently on. And perhaps as you practice this, you begin to notice something unexpected. The moment you stop trying to control everything, you do not become helpless. You become more available to reality. You see more clearly. You listen more deeply. You respond instead of reacting. You stop wasting so much energy fighting what has already happened. And that energy becomes available for living, for loving, for creating, for healing, for being present. So if there is something in your life you cannot control, you can acknowledge it. You can say, I may not be able to control this. And then, what can I do with this moment? Perhaps you cannot control the entire outcome, but you can control whether you meet this moment with honesty. Perhaps you cannot control another person's decision, but you can choose how you care for your own heart. Perhaps you cannot control the future, but you can choose how you live today. Perhaps you cannot control every thought, but you can choose whether to follow every thought. This is enough, more than enough for this moment. And as you breathe, allow the body to soften wherever it can, not because everything has been solved, but because for a few moments you do not need to solve it. You can put down the burden of being in charge of everything. You can release the belief that your peace must wait until the world becomes predictable. The world may remain unpredictable. People may remain imperfect. The future may remain unknown. And still, you can be here. Still, you can breathe. Still, you can meet life. There may be no perfect moment when all uncertainty disappears. So perhaps this moment is the place to begin, not by controlling life, but by becoming willing to meet life, not by demanding that everything remain the same, but by learning to remain present as things change, not by guaranteeing that you will never suffer, but by discovering that you can remain with yourself when suffering comes. And perhaps this is the quiet freedom that becomes available when you loosen your grip. You do not have to know everything. You do not have to control everything. You do not have to hold everything together. Life is moving, let it move. You are moving too, let yourself move with it. One breath, one moment, one honest step. And when fear tells you to close your hands around the future, gently notice, then breathe. You can care without controlling. You can prepare without obsessing. You can love without holding too tightly. You can live without a guarantee. And perhaps in the space created by letting go of control, you will discover that life was never asking you to control every wave. It was asking you to learn how to remain present while the ocean moves. And the ocean will move, the waves will rise, the waves will fall. Some moments will be calm, some will be difficult, but you are not required to stop the ocean. You are learning to meet the water. You are learning to breathe. You are learning that uncertainty is not always a sign that you are lost. Sometimes it is simply the place where the next moment has not yet revealed itself. So you can remain here. You can soften your grip. You can release the demand for guarantees. And for now, you can trust yourself with this moment, not with the entire future, just this moment. And then when the next moment arrives, you will meet that one too. There are moments in life when something inside you hurts, and your first instinct is to move away from it. You may reach for your phone, your work, food, entertainment, conversation, noise, sleep, or endless thinking. You may tell yourself that you are fine while a part of you is quietly asking to be noticed. You may become busy so that you do not have to feel. You may keep searching for the next thing that will finally make the discomfort disappear. And there is nothing wrong with wanting relief. When something hurts, it is natural to want the pain to stop. The difficulty begins when your entire life becomes organized around escaping anything uncomfortable. Then even a small feeling can become frightening. A little sadness becomes something you must immediately fix. A moment of anxiety becomes proof that something is terribly wrong. A difficult memory becomes something you must bury. And the more you run, the more powerful the thing you are running from can seem. So, for a moment, take a slow breath. You do not have to search for pain. You do not have to force yourself to remember anything. You do not have to bring difficult emotions closer than they naturally are. Simply notice what is already present. Perhaps there is tension somewhere in the body. Perhaps there is a feeling you have been avoiding. Perhaps there is fear about something that may happen. Perhaps there is sadness that has not had a place to rest. Whatever is here, you can begin by acknowledging it, not fixing it, not analyzing it, just acknowledging this is what is here right now. Sometimes the simple recognition is difficult because we have learned to believe that uncomfortable feelings are enemies. We think fear is something that must be defeated. We think sadness is a weakness. We think anger makes us bad. We think anxiety means we are losing control. But an emotion is an experience. It is something moving through you. It is not the whole of you. When a wave rises in the ocean does not become only the wave. The wave is real, but it is not separate from the vastness that holds it. In the same way, fear may be present within you without becoming all that you are. Sadness may be present without becoming your permanent identity. Anger may be present without deciding what you do next. Pain may be present without owning your entire life. You can feel something without becoming it. This is a powerful thing to discover because when you are afraid of fear itself, fear becomes larger. When you are afraid of sadness, sadness becomes something you must constantly monitor. When you are afraid of anxiety, the first sign of anxiety can create even more anxiety. The mind begins to say, no, not this again. And suddenly there are two experiences. There is the original feeling, and then there is the resistance to the feeling. There is anxiety, and then there is fear of anxiety. There is sadness. And then there is the thought, I should not be sad. There is pain. And then there is the belief, I cannot handle this pain. And often the second layer creates more suffering than the first. So perhaps you can begin to meet your experience differently. When fear appears, instead of immediately saying, how do I get rid of this? You might gently ask, can I be here with this for one breath? Not forever, not for the rest of your life. Just one breath. When sadness appears, you do not have to promise that you will remain sad forever. You can simply allow yourself to acknowledge sadness is here. When anger appears, you do not have to act from anger. You can feel the energy of anger without allowing it to become your behavior. This is an important distinction. Feeling is not the same as acting. You can feel anger and choose not to hurt someone. You can feel fear and choose not to run. You can feel sadness and choose not to abandon yourself. You can feel uncertainty and choose to remain present. The emotion can be there, and you can still choose. Perhaps this is what you have been searching for without realizing it. Not a life without difficult emotions, but a relationship with difficult emotions that does not require you to lose yourself. Take a moment now to notice the body. Where do you feel the most tension? Perhaps in the chest, perhaps in the stomach, perhaps in the throat, perhaps in the shoulders. You do not have to force the tension to relax. Simply notice. What does it feel like? Is it tight?
Warm, cold, moving.
Still, you do not need to create a story about it. You do not need to ask why it is there. For this moment, you can experience sensation as sensation. This is very different from saying, something is wrong with me. The body may be experiencing tension. That is what is happening. And you can be present with what is happening. Sometimes the mind wants to explain everything immediately. Why do I feel this way? Where did it come from? When will it end? These questions may have their place, but sometimes before understanding comes presence. Before solving comes listening. Before changing comes allowing yourself to recognize what is actually happening. You cannot meet an experience that you refuse to acknowledge. And perhaps you have spent years refusing to acknowledge certain parts of yourself. The part that is afraid, the part that feels lonely, the part that is tired, the part that still remembers, the part that does not know what to do. Maybe you believed that if you were strong, you would never feel these things. But strength does not always mean feeling nothing. Sometimes strength is the willingness to remain kind while something inside you is hurting. Sometimes strength is allowing yourself to say, this is difficult, not as a declaration of defeat, but as an honest recognition. This is difficult, and I am still here. This hurts. And I am still breathing. I do not know what to do next. And I can remain present for this moment. There is great power in such honesty because you no longer need to spend energy pretending. You no longer need to fight the fact that you are human. You can stop asking yourself to be untouched by life. Life will touch you. People will disappoint you. Plans will change. Loss will happen. The body will age. The future will remain uncertain. There will be moments of joy, and there will be moments that break your heart open. You cannot avoid all pain and still remain fully open to life. To live deeply is to be touched, and to be touched means that sometimes you will feel. So perhaps the question is not, how can I make sure I never hurt? Perhaps the question is, can I learn how to remain present when I hurt? Can you allow yourself to be a human being who sometimes does not know? Can you allow yourself to be someone who sometimes feels fear? Can you allow yourself to be imperfect without turning against yourself? This does not mean that you should remain in harmful situations. It does not mean that you should accept mistreatment. It does not mean that you should ignore real problems. There are times to leave. There are times to speak. There are times to seek help. There are times to protect yourself. But even while taking wise action, you do not have to hate the feelings that arise inside you. You can protect yourself without condemning yourself. You can move away from pain without believing that you are weak for having felt it. You can change your circumstances while learning to remain present with your inner experience. And perhaps you can begin to see that running from every uncomfortable feeling is not the same as being free. Sometimes freedom is the ability to remain present without immediately obeying the impulse to escape. The impulse says, get away. You notice. You breathe. You ask, what is actually needed here? Perhaps rest is needed. Perhaps a conversation is needed. Perhaps distance is needed. Perhaps tears are needed. Perhaps nothing needs to happen immediately. The feeling can be present while you wait for clarity. You do not have to make your most important decisions from the middle of emotional storms. You can allow the storm to move. You can listen. You can wait. And slowly the intensity may change. This is something emotions often do. They move, they rise, they reach a peak, they change, they soften, they disappear, and sometimes they return. But no emotional state remains exactly the same forever. Even when the mind says, this will never end, the experience is changing from moment to moment. Notice this. A feeling may seem permanent when you are inside it, but experience is always moving. The breath changes, the body changes, thoughts change, sensations change. You may not notice the movement because the mind is busy naming everything as one solid thing. My anxiety, my sadness, my pain. But if you look closely, experience is not solid. It is a collection of sensations, thoughts, memories, and reactions moving through time. You can meet each moment as it comes. You do not have to carry the entire emotional future at once. You only have to meet what is here now. And if what is here now is too much, you can make the moment smaller. One breath, one sensation, one sound, one step. You do not have to solve the whole mountain. You only have to find the next place to put your foot. Perhaps this is especially important when you have been suffering for a long time. The mind may say, I have felt this way for years, but you are not experiencing years all at once. You are experiencing this moment, and this moment can be met, then the next moment, then the next. You can let the future remain where it is. You can let the past remain where it is, and you can gently return to the experience of being here. Maybe your chest feels tight. Feel that. Maybe your breath is shallow. Notice that. Maybe tears are close. You do not have to stop them. Maybe you feel nothing. That is also something you can notice. There is no correct way to feel. There is no perfect meditation experience. You do not have to produce peace. You do not have to force healing. You can simply practice not abandoning yourself. This may be one of the deepest forms of compassion. When fear comes, you stay connected to yourself. When sadness comes, you do not insult yourself for being sad. When uncertainty comes, you do not demand that you immediately know everything. When pain comes, you do not decide that pain means your life is over. You remain, not because you enjoy suffering, but because you are discovering that you can meet what is here. And perhaps the emotion that you have been trying to escape has something to teach you. Not necessarily a clear message, not necessarily a lesson that must be understood immediately, but perhaps it teaches you that you are alive, that something matters, that something needs attention, that you have reached a limit, that you need rest, that you need to grieve, that you need to release an old story, that you need to stop pretending. You do not have to turn every pain into a beautiful lesson. Sometimes pain is simply painful. You do not have to make it meaningful before you are allowed to feel it. You can let it be what it is. And in allowing it to be what it is, you may stop adding unnecessary suffering to it. You may stop saying, this should not be happening. You may stop saying, I should be over this. You may stop saying, I should be stronger. And perhaps you can say, this is where I am right now, not forever, right now. And right now I can breathe. Right now I can take care of this moment. Right now I can choose not to run from myself. The mind may still resist. That is okay. You do not have to force yourself to enjoy the process. You are simply learning, learning to stay, learning to feel, learning to observe, learning that an emotion can be experienced without becoming your identity. And each time you remain present with a difficult feeling without immediately escaping, you discover something. You discover that you can survive the experience of feeling. You discover that discomfort rises and falls. You discover that fear can be present while you continue breathing. You discover that sadness can be present while you remain worthy of love. You discover that uncertainty can be present while you take the next step. And perhaps over time, the fear of feeling begins to soften. You no longer need to spend all of your energy preventing emotions. You can allow them to come. You can allow them to move. You can allow them to go. And if they return, you can meet them again, not perfectly, not without resistance, but with a little more kindness than before. So now, take a slow breath. Imagine that you do not need to push anything away. You do not need to invite anything closer. Let the inner world be as it is. If fear is here, let fear be known. If sadness is here, let sadness be known. If peace is here, let peace be known. If confusion is here, let confusion be known. You are not required to choose one emotion and make it your permanent home. Everything moves, everything changes, and you can remain present through the movement. You can be the space that allows the experience to arise. You can listen without becoming lost. You can feel without drowning. You can care without being consumed. You can allow pain without turning pain into a definition of who you are. And perhaps slowly you begin to understand that the goal was never to become a person who never feels fear. The goal was to become a person who no longer needs to run from every feeling. The goal was never to eliminate sadness. The goal was to stop believing that sadness makes you broken. The goal was never to control every emotion. The goal was to learn that emotions can move through an open heart. So when something difficult arises, you can pause, you can breathe, you can say, this is here, and then I am here too. The feeling is here, and you are here. The pain is here, and you are here. The uncertainty is here, and you are here. And perhaps that is enough for this breath. You do not need to solve the whole future. You do not need to erase the past. You do not need to become fearless. You only need to remain with yourself for this moment, then the next, and the next, and slowly, the thing you once believed you could not face may become something you can meet. Not because it was never painful, but because you discovered that you could be present with pain without losing yourself. You can feel the wave. You can let the wave rise. You can let the wave fall. And beneath the changing waves, there is still a place within you that can notice, that can breathe, that can remain. So if you are carrying something difficult today, do not demand that it disappear immediately. Do not make your healing another reason to attack yourself. You can take the next gentle step. You can rest when you need to rest. You can ask for support when you need support. You can protect what needs protection. And you can continue learning how to remain present with your own heart, because you do not have to wait until you are completely free from pain before you begin living. You can live while healing. You can breathe while uncertain. You can love while vulnerable. You can move forward while still carrying questions. You can be unfinished and still worthy of peace. You can be afraid and still be courageous. You can be hurting and still be whole. And perhaps the deepest freedom comes when you stop demanding that you must first become invulnerable before you are allowed to live openly. You are human. You will feel, you will change, you will lose, you will begin again, and through all of it, you can practice one simple thing. When the mind says, run, pause. When the heart says, I cannot feel this, breathe. When fear says, you are not strong enough, remain for one more breath. Not forever, just now, just this moment. And perhaps as you remain, you will discover that what you were running from was not always as powerful as you believed. Perhaps you were not afraid only of the feeling. Perhaps you were afraid that the feeling would never end. But feelings change. Moments change. Life changes. and you can change with it. You can meet what comes. You can let go of what has passed. You can remain open to what is here. And when the next wave rises, you do not have to become the wave. You can feel it. You can breathe through it. You can allow it to move. And you can remember this too is an experience. This too is passing. And I am still here. The mind has a remarkable ability to leave the moment you are actually living. Your body may be sitting here, but the mind may be somewhere else entirely. It may be returning to something that happened yesterday, something someone said years ago, something you wish you had done differently, something you fear may happen tomorrow, or something that may never happen at all. And before you realize it, the present moment has passed while you were living inside a story about another time. This happens so naturally that you may not even notice it. You wake up in the morning, and before your feet touch the ground, the mind has already begun its journey. It remembers an old problem. It imagines a future conversation. It worries about what needs to be done. It revisits something painful. It creates a list of everything that might go wrong. The body is here, but the mind has already traveled far away. And then perhaps you suddenly notice you are here. You take a breath. You realize that you have been thinking for several minutes, perhaps much longer, and often the first reaction is criticism. How did I get so distracted? Why can't I stay present? What is wrong with me? But notice what has happened. You were lost in thought. Then awareness appeared. That moment of noticing is not failure. That moment is the return. This is something worth understanding deeply. Presence does not mean that the mind never wanders. The mind wanders. That is what minds do. Presence is the gentle act of recognizing that you have wandered and coming back again and again. You do not need to punish yourself for leaving the present. You only need to return. Take a slow breath now. Feel the breath entering the body. Feel the breath leaving the body. You do not have to make the breath special. You do not have to breathe perfectly. Simply notice in and out. This breath is happening now. The past is not breathing. The future is not breathing. This moment is. And perhaps for just a few seconds, you can allow yourself to be where you actually are, not where you were, not where you might be here. There is a great deal of suffering created by living in moments that are not happening. The past can be useful when you learn from it. Memories can be meaningful. Reflection can help you understand your life. But there is a difference between remembering the past and repeatedly returning to it as though you are still living there. The mind may replay a conversation. It may return to something someone did. It may ask, why did I allow that? Why didn't I say this? What if I had chosen differently? And perhaps you have asked these questions many times, but the past does not change because you think about it one more time. Sometimes the mind believes that if it analyzes the past enough, it will finally find a perfect answer that removes all pain. But often it simply creates another circle of thought. You return to the same memory, you feel the same emotion, you ask the same questions, and the mind calls this problem solving. But perhaps sometimes it is simply suffering repeating itself. So when you notice that you have returned to an old story, you do not have to fight the memory. You do not have to tell yourself, I must never think about this again. You can simply notice remembering is happening and then gently return to the breath, to the body, to this room, to the sound around you, to the fact that right now you are not inside that old moment. You are here. This does not erase what happened. It does not deny the past. It simply recognizes that the past is no longer happening in this exact moment. And perhaps this distinction can give you a little space. The same is true of the future. The mind often believes that worrying about the future is a way of preparing for it. Sometimes planning is helpful. Sometimes action is needed. But there is a kind of worry that does not prepare you. It only makes you suffer before anything has happened. The mind imagines a possibility, then it reacts to the possibility as though it is already reality. A conversation that has not happened creates real tension in the body. A problem that may never occur steals peace from the present. A future loss is experienced before it arrives. And perhaps you can begin to notice this. The thought is here, the imagined event is not. This is not a reason to ignore real responsibilities. It is simply a reminder to distinguish between what is happening and what the mind is imagining. Right now, perhaps you are sitting or lying down. Perhaps the body is supported. Perhaps the breath is moving. Perhaps there are sounds around you. This is what is actually happening now. The mind may say, but what about tomorrow? You can answer by returning to today. The mind may say, what if something goes wrong? You can say, if something happens, I will meet it when it happens. You do not need to live every possible future in advance. You only need to live this moment. And then, when the future becomes the present, you will meet that moment too. This is how life actually unfolds, one moment at a time. But the mind often wants to experience the entire lifetime at once. It wants to know everything. It wants to solve everything. It wants to prepare for every possible event. And this is exhausting. You do not need to carry tomorrow while standing in today. You do not need to carry next year while breathing this breath. You do not need to carry every possible outcome while making one decision. The present moment is smaller than the entire future, and perhaps that is a mercy. You can meet this moment. You can take care of this moment. You can return to this moment, and perhaps the next moment will take care of itself when it arrives. Notice how often the mind tries to make peace conditional. I will relax when this problem is solved. I will be happy when this person changes. I will rest when everything is finished. I will be present when my life becomes easier. But life may never become completely free from unfinished things. There may always be something to do, someone to respond to, something uncertain, something imperfect. If your peace must wait until everything is complete, you may spend your entire life waiting. So perhaps you can practice being present in an unfinished life. The dishes may not be done. The questions may not be answered. The future may not be clear. The relationship may still be complicated. And still, there is this breath. Still, there is this moment. Still, you can be here. Presence does not require that life become perfect. It requires only that you notice where you are. You can be present while something is unresolved. You can be present while waiting. You can be present while healing. You can be present while uncertain. You can be present while your mind is not completely peaceful. This is important because many people are waiting for a perfect inner condition before they allow themselves to live. They believe they must first eliminate anxiety. They must first understand everything. They must first become confident. They must first heal completely. But what if life is not something that begins after you are fully healed? What if life is happening now, while you are still learning, while you are still changing, while you are still carrying questions? You do not need to become a finished person to experience this moment. You are allowed to be here as you are. Perhaps you can notice the body again. Feel the weight of the body. Feel the contact between your body and whatever supports you. Notice the temperature of the air. Notice the sounds. Notice the movement of the breath. You do not have to search for peace. You are simply becoming aware of what is already happening. This is the practice of returning. The mind wanders. You notice, you return. The mind wanders again. You notice, you return again. There is no need to become angry. The mind is not your enemy. It has learned patterns. It has learned to remember. It has learned to worry. It has learned to anticipate. You are not trying to destroy the mind. You are learning to relate to it differently. When the mind pulls you into the past, you can notice. When it pulls you into the future, you can notice. When it creates a story about who you are, you can notice. And then you can ask, what is happening now? Not what happened 5 years ago, not what might happen 5 years from now. What is happening now? Perhaps the answer is simple. You are breathing, you are sitting, you are listening, you are alive. And perhaps for this moment, that is enough. Sometimes the present moment seems too ordinary to be valuable. The mind wants something dramatic, a major breakthrough, a powerful realization, a completely transformed life, but presence is often quiet. It may be the feeling of warm water on your hands, the sound of rain, the sensation of your feet touching the ground, the first breath after waking, a moment of silence before speaking, the simple awareness that you are here. The mind may overlook these moments because they do not seem important, but your life is made of these moments, not the imaginary future, not the edited past, these moments. So perhaps you can begin to treat the ordinary as worthy of your attention. When you eat, notice that you are eating. When you walk, notice that you are walking. When someone speaks to you, notice that you are listening. When you are washing something, notice the movement of your hands. You do not have to turn life into a performance of mindfulness. You simply begin to return to what is already happening. And when you forget, you return again. There is no need to make this complicated. You do not have to wait for a special place. You do not have to wait for perfect silence. You do not have to wait until you have an hour of free time. You can return in the middle of a difficult conversation. You can return while waiting. You can return when the mind is anxious. You can return while walking. You can return when you realize that you have been lost in thought. The return is always available. This breath is always available. This moment is always available. Even if the previous moment was difficult, this moment has arrived. And perhaps that is one of the most beautiful things about being alive. You can begin again without waiting for permission. You do not have to repair every moment that came before this one, before you are allowed to experience the present. You can return now. The past may have shaped you, but it does not have to control every moment that comes next. The future may be uncertain, but it does not need to steal every moment before it arrives. You can meet life where life is, here, now, this breath, this body, this moment. Perhaps the mind will resist. Perhaps it will say, this is too simple. Perhaps it will demand something more. You can notice that too. The desire for something more is another experience passing through. You do not need to obey it. You can remain. And perhaps this is where you begin to understand that presence is not an escape from life. It is a return to life. When you are lost in regret, you are not fully meeting this moment. When you are lost in fear of tomorrow, you are not fully meeting this moment. When you are lost in stories about yourself, you are not fully meeting this moment. But when you return, even briefly, you are here again, and life is here, the light, the sounds, the breath, the body, the people around you, the opportunities that exist now. You may have been missing what is here because you were constantly preparing for what might come next. So, for a moment, stop preparing. Stop reviewing. Stop rehearsing, just be here. You do not need to solve the future in this breath. You do not need to correct the past in this breath. You can simply breathe, and if the mind wanders, you can return. There is no shame in returning. The mind may wander 1,000 times. You may return 1,000 times. Each return is a moment of awareness. Each return is a moment of freedom. Each return is a reminder that you are not completely controlled by where the mind goes. You can notice where it has gone, and you can choose to come back. This is a quiet form of strength, not the strength of forcing, the strength of remembering, remembering that you are here, remembering that the thought is not the moment, remembering that the memory is not the present, remembering that the imagined future is not happening now, remembering that this breath is real. So if you are carrying the past, you can gently set it down for one breath, not forever, just for this breath. If you are worrying about the future, you can set it down for one breath, not forever, just for this breath. You can return to the ground beneath you. You can return to the movement of the breath. You can return to the simple fact that you are here. And perhaps you will discover that you do not need to force peace into existence. You only need to stop leaving the moment every time discomfort appears. You can remain, you can feel, you can breathe, you can allow the moment to be imperfect. And slowly, the mind begins to learn that the present is not something it has to escape. There may be difficulty here. There may be uncertainty here. There may be pain here. But there is also life here. And you do not have to miss the whole of life because one part of life is difficult. You can acknowledge the pain and still notice the breath. You can acknowledge the fear and still notice the sky. You can acknowledge the sadness and still hear the sound around you. Many things can exist in the same moment. You do not have to choose between being aware of pain and being aware of beauty. You can hold both. This moment may contain difficulty, and it may also contain a breath, a sound, a little warmth, a little space, a small possibility you can notice, and you can return again, again, and again, and again. Perhaps that is enough practice for today, not becoming someone who is never distracted, not becoming someone who never worries, not becoming someone who never remembers the past, simply becoming someone who knows how to return. When you realize you are lost, return. When you notice you are worrying, return. When you discover you are living inside an old memory, return. When you catch yourself rehearsing a future that has not happened, return. No criticism, no punishment. Just return. The mind may wander. Let it wander. And when you notice, come home to the breath, come home to the body, come home to this moment, because this moment is the only place where your life is actually happening, not yesterday, not tomorrow, here. And you may not always like what is here. That is okay. You do not have to like a moment in order to be present for it. You can be present with uncertainty. You can be present with discomfort. You can be present with waiting. You can be present with unanswered questions. You can be present with the parts of life you wish were different. Presence is not approval. It is awareness. You are simply willing to see what is here before deciding what to do next. And from that awareness, a wiser response becomes possible. You do not have to react to a story that the mind created 5 minutes ago. You can pause, you can see, you can return. And perhaps the more you return, the more you realize that you have been searching for peace in places that cannot give it to you. You searched in the past, hoping to find a different ending. You searched in the future, hoping to find a guarantee. You searched in other people, hoping they would give you permanent security. But this moment has always been waiting, not promising that everything will be easy, not promising that nothing will ever hurt, simply offering you the possibility of being here. And perhaps for now you can accept that invitation. One breath, one moment, one return. The past can remain where it is, the future can remain unknown, and you can remain here not because you have solved everything, but because you have remembered where you are. You are here, you are breathing, you are alive, and this moment, exactly as it is the place from which your next moment will arise. So you do not need to rush ahead. You do not need to go back. You can stay. You can listen. You can breathe. And if the mind leaves, you can gently bring it home again and again and again. There is a voice inside many people that they have learned to live with for so long that they no longer question it. It speaks when they make a mistake. It speaks when they feel afraid. It speaks when they are tired, uncertain, confused, or unable to do what they believe they should be able to do. And often, this voice does not speak with kindness. It says, "You should have known better. You're not doing enough. Why are you still like this? Everyone else seems to be moving forward. You should be stronger by now. You should have healed already." Perhaps you have heard this voice. Perhaps you have believed that this harshness is what keeps you improving. Perhaps you have thought that if you criticize yourself enough, you will finally become the person you want to be. But take a moment to consider something. Has self judgment truly made you peaceful? Has attacking yourself made you feel safe? Has telling yourself that you are not enough created a deep and lasting sense of worth? Perhaps sometimes criticism creates temporary movement. You may push yourself harder, you may achieve something, you may force yourself to continue, but underneath the achievement, there may still be exhaustion. There may still be fear. There may still be the feeling that no matter what you do, you must keep proving that you are worthy. And this is a very tiring way to live. So perhaps the practice is not to become a person who never makes mistakes. Perhaps the practice is to learn how to remain kind to yourself when you do. This does not mean pretending that mistakes do not matter. It does not mean refusing to learn. It does not mean making excuses for harmful behavior. Compassion is not the same as avoiding responsibility. You can acknowledge that something needs to change without declaring that you are a terrible person. You can say, "I made a mistake," without saying, "I am a mistake." You can say, "I handled that poorly," without saying, "I am hopeless." You can recognize that you have caused pain and still believe that you are capable of learning. This distinction can change the way you relate to yourself, because when you attack yourself, you often create more fear, and a frightened mind does not always learn clearly. A frightened mind may hide, it may deny, it may become defensive, it may pretend nothing happened because admitting the truth feels unbearable. But when you meet yourself with a little more honesty and a little less hatred, you may become more willing to see clearly. You can look at what happened. You can acknowledge your part. You can make amends where possible. You can learn, and then you can continue. You do not have to punish yourself forever to prove that you understand. Perhaps you have been carrying an old mistake for years. Maybe something you said, something you did, something you failed to do, a decision you regret, a moment when you were not the person you wanted to be. And perhaps you have returned to that memory again and again. Each time you judge yourself with the knowledge you have now. But you did not have the knowledge you have now then. You were living from the understanding, fear, pain, and awareness that existed in that moment. This does not mean that every decision was right. It means that you can look back with understanding instead of only punishment. You can ask, what was I afraid of? What was I trying to protect? What did I not understand? What can I learn now? These questions create space. Self judgment often closes the door. It says, you are bad, end of story. Compassion says, something happened, let us look honestly. And there is a difference. And perhaps this is what it means to begin reprogramming the inner world. You begin to notice the way you speak to yourself, not to judge the judgment, not to criticize yourself for criticizing yourself. Simply notice when something goes wrong, what do you say inwardly? When someone rejects you, what story do you create about yourself? When you feel tired, do you allow yourself to rest or do you call yourself lazy? When you need help, do you allow yourself to receive it or do you decide that needing help means you are weak? When you make a mistake, do you learn or do you punish? You do not need to change everything immediately. Awareness comes first. You cannot transform a pattern you do not see. So notice the voice, notice its words, notice its tone, notice how the body feels when you believe it. Perhaps the chest becomes tight. Perhaps the stomach contracts. Perhaps the shoulders become heavy. The mind says something, the body responds, and then you can pause. You can ask, would I speak to someone I love this way? If a friend came to you and said, I made a mistake and I feel terrible, would you say, you are worthless, you should suffer forever? Probably not. You might tell them the truth. You might help them see what needs to change. But you might also remind them that one moment does not define an entire life. Perhaps you can begin offering yourself some of that same honesty, not because you are more deserving than anyone else, but because you are also a human being. You also experience fear. You also become confused. You also make mistakes. You also need compassion. And perhaps the hardest person to offer compassion to is sometimes yourself. You may believe that everyone else deserves understanding. But when it comes to you, the rules change. Everyone else is allowed to be tired. You are not. Everyone else is allowed to make mistakes. You are not. Everyone else is allowed to have a difficult day. You are not. Everyone else is allowed to be imperfect. You are expected to be beyond imperfection. And perhaps this expectation is impossible. You are not a machine. You are not required to perform perfectly every day. You are a living human being moving through changing circumstances. Some days you will be wise. Some days you will be confused. Some days you will be patient. Some days you will lose patience. Some days you will feel strong. Some days you will need support. This does not make you a failure. It makes you human. And perhaps you can let that be true. You can allow yourself to be a person who is still learning. There is something beautiful about not needing to have everything figured out. You can be unfinished. You can be uncertain. You can be in the middle of changing. You do not have to wait until you become perfect before you offer yourself kindness. In fact, kindness may be one of the conditions that allows real change to happen. When you are constantly attacking yourself, you may become too afraid to look honestly at your life. But when you create a little safety inside, you may become more willing to face what needs to be faced. You can say, yes, I made a mistake. Yes, I have patterns I need to change. Yes, there are things I regret. And I am still willing to meet myself with honesty. This is not weakness. This is courage. It takes courage to look at yourself without either exaggerating your faults or pretending they do not exist. You can see clearly, you can take responsibility, and you can refuse to turn responsibility into self-hatred. Perhaps there is something you have been trying to change through force. You keep telling yourself, I must stop being this way. I must stop feeling this. I must become different immediately. But transformation is often not created by violence against yourself. You cannot hate yourself into lasting peace. You may be able to frighten yourself into temporary obedience. But fear is a poor foundation for freedom. What if instead you practiced understanding, what is this pattern trying to do for me? What fear is underneath it? What need have I been trying to meet? Is there another way? These questions do not excuse your behavior. They help you understand it, and what is understood can often be changed more wisely. Perhaps you procrastinate because you are afraid of failing. Perhaps you control because you are afraid of uncertainty. Perhaps you withdraw because you are afraid of rejection. Perhaps you become angry because something inside you feels powerless. Perhaps you constantly seek approval because you have forgotten how to offer yourself acceptance. When you see the fear underneath the pattern, you may no longer need to attack the pattern with the same intensity. You can meet the fear. And when fear is met with awareness, something begins to soften. This does not happen instantly. You may fall back into old patterns. You may criticize yourself again. You may forget everything you learned. And when that happens, you can practice compassion there too. You can say, I forgot, and then return. You do not have to be perfect at self-compassion. Even the belief that you must practice compassion perfectly can become another form of self-judgment. You may be impatient with yourself while learning patience. You may criticize yourself for being unable to stop criticizing yourself. Notice this gently. You are allowed to begin again, again, and again. Perhaps you can place a hand over the heart if that feels natural, not because a gesture will magically solve everything, but because sometimes the body understands gentleness before the mind does. Feel the warmth of your hand, feel the movement of the breath, and silently say, I am learning. I am allowed to be human. I can take responsibility without destroying myself. I can grow without hating who I am now. I can begin again. You do not have to believe these words completely. You can simply allow them to exist as possibilities. Perhaps there is a part of you that does not believe you deserve kindness. That part may have been hurt. It may have learned that love must be earned through achievement. It may have learned that mistakes lead to rejection. It may have learned that being vulnerable is dangerous. You do not have to force that part to change immediately. You can meet it with patience. You can say, I understand why you learned to protect yourself this way. And perhaps this is the beginning of a new relationship with yourself. Not forcing, not demanding, listening. You may discover that the harsh inner voice was once trying to protect you. Perhaps it believed that if it criticized you first, no one else could hurt you as much. Perhaps it believed that perfection would keep you safe. Perhaps it believed that constant worry would prevent disaster. Perhaps it believed that never resting would make you worthy. You do not have to hate this voice. You can understand it. And then you can gently tell it, thank you for trying to protect me, but I do not need to live this way anymore. This may take time. Old patterns do not disappear simply because you understand them once. You may return to them. That is okay. The practice is not to never fall into the old pattern. The practice is to notice sooner. Perhaps you used to spend days attacking yourself. Then one day, you notice after a few hours. Later, you notice after a few minutes. Eventually, you may notice the first harsh thought as it appears. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can follow it, or you can pause. You can breathe. You can respond differently. This is how a new pattern grows, not through one perfect decision, through many small moments. A mistake occurs. You notice the inner attack. You pause. You tell the truth. You learn. You choose your next step and you continue. Someone disappoints you. You notice the voice saying, "It must be because I am not enough." You pause. You remember that another person's behavior is not a complete definition of your worth. You feel the pain. You allow the pain. You remain with yourself. You continue. You become tired. The voice says, "You are lazy." You pause. You notice that the body may simply be asking for rest. You listen. You rest without turning rest into a moral failure. You continue. This is how compassion becomes practical. It is not merely a beautiful idea, it changes the way you respond to ordinary moments. You stop abandoning yourself every time you are imperfect. You stop making every difficult emotion evidence against your worth. You stop turning every mistake into a permanent identity. And slowly, the mind learns something new. I can be honest without being cruel. I can improve without hating myself. I can face my pain without becoming my pain. I can make mistakes and still continue. This does not mean that you will never feel shame. You may still feel it, but you do not have to build a home inside it. You can notice shame. You can understand where it comes from. You can repair what needs to be repaired. And you can allow yourself to move forward. You do not honor the past by remaining imprisoned by it. Sometimes the most honest way to honor what happened is to learn from it and live differently now. And perhaps this is what you can offer yourself today. Not the promise that you will never fail again, not the promise that you will never feel afraid, not the promise that you will always know what to do. Simply this: when I forget, I will return. When I make a mistake, I will look honestly. When I feel pain, I will try not to abandon myself. When I do not know, I will allow myself to learn. This is enough. You are not required to become a completely different person tonight. You are only invited to notice how you are meeting yourself. Are you adding more pain to pain? Are you turning a difficult moment into a judgment about your entire life? Are you demanding perfection from someone who is simply trying to survive, learn, and grow? If so, perhaps you can soften, not because you have done everything right, but because punishment has not given you the peace you were searching for. You can choose something different. You can choose awareness. You can choose honesty. You can choose responsibility. And you can choose compassion. All of these can exist together. You can say, and also, I am still capable of change. You can say, I am hurting. And also, I am still worthy of care. You can say, I do not know what to do. And also, I can take one step. You can say, I am not where I want to be. And also, I do not have to hate where I am in order to continue. This is the beginning of a kinder mind, not a mind that tells you everything is perfect, a mind that tells you the truth without destroying you with the truth, a mind that can see your weaknesses without forgetting your humanity, a mind that can acknowledge your wounds without making them your entire identity, a mind that can recognize your mistakes without denying your capacity to grow. And perhaps over time, the voice inside you begins to change. The old voice may still appear, but it is no longer the only voice. There is another voice, quieter, more honest. It says, slow down. Look again. You are learning. This moment is difficult, but it is not your entire life. You can begin again. And perhaps that voice has always been there. Perhaps you simply need to stop drowning it out with judgment. So take a slow breath. Allow yourself to be exactly as human as you are. You do not have to become perfect before you deserve peace. You do not have to heal completely before you deserve kindness. You do not have to understand everything before you are allowed to rest. You can begin now with the part of you that is tired, with the part of you that is afraid, with the part of you that still makes mistakes, with the part of you that does not know how to let go. You can meet criticism, not with demands, but with the simple recognition, I am here. And perhaps for today, that is enough. You are learning, you are changing, you are still becoming. And the fact that you are not finished does not mean that you are failing. It means that life is still moving through you. So when the next mistake comes, pause. When the next difficult feeling comes, pause. When the old voice tells you that you are not enough, pause. Take a breath. Notice. And remember that a thought is not a verdict. A feeling is not a sentence. A mistake is not an identity. You can respond, you can learn, you can begin again. And again, perhaps the deepest compassion is not the belief that you will never struggle. Perhaps it is the willingness to remain beside yourself when you do, to stay, to listen, to tell the truth, to take responsibility, to forgive what can be forgiven, to repair what can be repaired. And then when the time comes to let yourself continue, you do not have to carry every old judgment into the future. You do not have to keep punishing yourself for being someone who was still learning. You can honor the past without living inside it. You can acknowledge the person you were without refusing the person you are becoming. And perhaps this is where the mind begins to change most deeply. Not when you force yourself to think beautiful thoughts, but when you stop treating yourself as an enemy, when you stop believing that suffering is the price of becoming worthy, when you discover that you can grow from love as well as from fear, you can change because you care about your life. You can become wiser because you are willing to see clearly. You can let go because you no longer need to hold yourself hostage to your past. And so, for this moment, allow yourself to breathe. Let the body soften where it can. Let the mind be imperfect. Let the heart be human. You do not have to solve yourself. You are not a problem that must be completely fixed. You are a living being learning how to meet life. And perhaps that is enough. Perhaps you can stop for a moment and say, I do not need to become perfect to be worthy of peace. I do not need to punish myself to prove that I care. I can learn without hating myself. I can change without rejecting myself. I can begin again. And if you forget these words tomorrow, that is okay. You can remember again. If you become harsh with yourself, you can notice. If you fall into an old pattern, you can return. If you make another mistake, you can learn. There is always another moment, another breath, another opportunity to meet yourself differently. And perhaps, slowly, you begin to understand that the mind is not transformed by constant war. It is transformed by awareness, by patience, by truth, by compassion. One moment at a time. You do not have to become someone who never struggles. You only have to become someone who no longer abandons yourself every time you do. And perhaps that is where true inner freedom begins. And now, as we come to the end of this meditation, perhaps you can take one final slow breath and allow yourself to recognize how far you have already come. You may still have thoughts. You may still have fears. You may still have questions. You may still have parts of yourself that are healing. And that is okay. You do not need to leave this moment as a completely different person. You do not need to feel perfectly peaceful. You do not need to have solved your entire life. Perhaps the deepest change is not always something dramatic that you can immediately see. Sometimes it is simply the moment when you notice a thought without believing it, the moment when you feel fear without running from yourself, The moment when you realize that you are trying to control what cannot be controlled and gently release your grip. The moment when your mind wanders into the past or the future and you quietly return. The moment when you make a mistake and choose not to become your own enemy. These moments may seem small, but a life is changed through small moments repeated with awareness. Each time you pause instead of reacting, something within you becomes freer. Each time you observe instead of immediately believing, you create space. Each time you remain with yourself through discomfort, you become less afraid of your own inner world. Each time you return to the present, you return to your life. And each time you meet yourself with compassion, you begin to create a new relationship with the person you spend every moment of your life with, yourself. So, as you move forward from this meditation, do not demand perfection from yourself. You will forget, you will become distracted, you will fall back into old patterns. You will sometimes react from fear. You will sometimes try to control what cannot be controlled. You will sometimes run from feelings you do not want to face. This does not mean that you have failed. It simply means you have another opportunity to return. Return to the breath, return to awareness, return to honesty, return to compassion, return to this moment. You do not have to return perfectly. You only have to return again and again. Perhaps tomorrow an old thought will appear, a thought that once controlled you, a fear that once pulled you into panic, a memory that once made you lose yourself. And maybe this time you will notice, you will feel the familiar pull. But before you follow it, you will pause, you will breathe, and perhaps you will remember this is a thought, this is a feeling, this is a moment, and I am here. That small space between what appears inside you and what you choose to do next is precious. In that space, you are not powerless. You are not trapped. You are not required to obey every thought. You can choose, not always perfectly, not always immediately, but more and more. You can choose to listen without believing. You can choose to feel without drowning. You can choose to act without controlling every outcome. You can choose to return without criticizing yourself. You can choose to grow without hating the person you are today. And perhaps this is the true reprogramming of the mind, not replacing every negative thought with a perfect positive thought, not forcing yourself to pretend that life is always beautiful, but learning to meet reality with greater awareness, learning to stop making war with your own experience, learning to stop abandoning yourself whenever life becomes difficult, learning that you can be afraid and still remain. You can be uncertain and still move forward. You can be imperfect and still be worthy of love. You can be healing and still be alive. You can be unfinished and still be whole. So take one final slow breath in. And as you breathe out, let go of the belief that you must have everything figured out right now. You do not. You only need this moment. And when the next moment comes, you will meet that one too. Life will continue to change. Thoughts will continue to rise and fall. Emotions will move through you. Some days will be easy. Some days will be difficult. But you can continue learning how to stay present through all of it. You can continue learning how to soften. You can continue learning how to let go. You can continue learning how to come home to yourself. And if you remember only one thing from this meditation, remember this: you are not every thought that passes through your mind. You are not every fear that visits your heart. You are not every mistake you have made. You are not the worst thing that has ever happened to you. You are the awareness that can notice. You are the presence that can return. You are the person who can begin again. And you can begin again now, not because the past was perfect, not because the future is guaranteed, but because this moment is here, and this moment is enough to take one more breath, one more step, one more honest look, one more gentle beginning. So when the mind becomes loud, do not immediately believe that you are lost. When fear rises, do not assume that you are powerless. When sadness arrives, do not decide that you will feel this way forever. When you make a mistake, do not turn one moment into a definition of your entire life. Pause, breathe, notice, and ask yourself, what is actually happening right now? Then meet the answer with honesty, not with war, not with shame, not with the demand to become someone else, just with awareness. Because the moment you stop fighting yourself, you begin to discover how much energy has been spent trying to escape your own life. And when that energy is no longer spent on the war, it becomes available for something else, for healing, for love, for creativity, for presence, for living. You do not need to become a different person to begin. You do not need to wait until the mind is silent. You do not need to wait until fear disappears. You do not need to wait until every wound is healed. You can begin exactly where you are, with the mind you have, with the heart you have, with the life you have. And perhaps the most powerful thing you will ever learn is not how to control everything that happens within you. It is learning that you can remain present with what happens without losing yourself. That is freedom, not a life without waves, but the ability to remember that you are larger than the wave, not a mind without thoughts, but the ability to see thoughts without becoming trapped inside them, not a heart without pain, but the ability to remain open without allowing pain to define everything. And now, as you leave this meditation, carry this awareness with you into the next conversation, into the next difficult moment, into the next uncertain day. You do not need to carry these words perfectly. You do not need to remember every lesson. Just remember to return. When you notice yourself lost in the past, return. When you notice yourself frightened by the future, return. When you notice yourself trying to control everything, return. When you notice yourself running from your emotions, return. When you notice yourself attacking yourself, return. Return to the breath. Return to the body. Return to the present. Return to compassion. Return to yourself. And if you have been waiting for the perfect moment to change your life, perhaps you can stop waiting. The perfect moment may never arrive, but this moment has, and perhaps this is the moment where something begins, not with a dramatic promise, not with a demand, just with one quiet decision. I will not abandon myself, even when I am afraid, even when I am uncertain, even when I make mistakes, even when I do not know what comes next. I will return, I will breathe, I will remain, and I will begin again, because maybe the life you are waiting to live is not waiting somewhere in the future. Maybe it is waiting in the moment you finally stop running away from the life that is already here. So the next time your mind becomes noisy, remember this: you do not have to fight every thought. You do not have to solve every fear. You do not have to control every outcome. You do not have to become perfect. You can simply pause, and in that pause, you may discover something that was there all along: a breath, a moment, a little space, and within that space, a choice. And within that choice, freedom. So take one last breath. Let the past be where it is. Let the future remain unknown, and allow yourself to be here. You are here. You are breathing. You are still learning. You are still becoming. And no matter how many times you lose your way, there is always another moment in which you can return. That is the hook you should carry with you. The mind may wander. Life may change. Fear may come, but you can always return. And sometimes the greatest transformation does not begin when you finally become someone new. It begins when you stop rejecting the person who is here right now. So go gently, be patient with yourself, meet the next moment as it comes. And whenever you forget, whenever you fall back into old patterns, whenever you feel lost again, remember you do not have to start your entire life over. You only have to take one breath, one moment, one step, and begin again.